Widow goes to sell her wedding dress to pay rent, but the man who buys it looks into her eyes and falls in love. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The closet door creaked as Eleanor pulled it open, the sound echoing through her silent apartment like a mournful cry. She stood there for a moment, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the garment bag hanging in the far corner. It had been 3 years since she had touched it, 3 years since she'd allowed herself to even look at it. The white plastic cover had gathered a fine layer of dust, a physical manifestation of the memories she had tried to bury. Eleanor took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to do. With gentle hands, she unzipped the bag, revealing the shimmering white fabric inside. Her wedding dress. The dress she had worn on what was supposed to be the beginning of a lifetime with Mark. Now it was just another reminder of dreams that would never come true. The morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, catching on the delicate beadwork and making the dress sparkle. Eleanor carefully removed it from the bag, holding it against her body. It still smelled faintly of the perfume she had worn that day, a scent that instantly transported her back to a moment of pure joy, now tainted with the bitterness of loss. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was apologizing to Mark or to herself. Maybe both. The harsh reality of her situation brought her back to the present. The past due rent notices piled on her kitchen counter, the final warning from her landlord, the empty refrigerator. 3 years of struggling to stay afloat after Mark's sudden death had depleted her savings, and the medical bills from his brief but devastating illness had left her drowning in debt. Her part-time job at the local library simply wasn't enough anymore. Eleanor gently laid the dress on her bed, smoothing out the fabric with careful hands. It was a beautiful A-line gown with intricate lace detailing, the kind that never really went out of style. She had spent months saving for it, had fallen in love with it the moment she tried it on. Mark had never seen it until their wedding day, and the look in his eyes when she walked down the aisle was a memory she had cherished. Now it was just another asset to be sold. With a heavy heart, Eleanor took several photos of the dress from different angles, making sure to capture the beadwork and lace details. She wrote a brief description, emphasizing its excellent condition and the original price. After a moment's hesitation, she posted the listing online, asking for significantly less than she had paid for it. She needed the money quickly, and haggling would only delay the inevitable. Eleanor spent the rest of the morning cleaning her small apartment, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. At 32, she had never imagined she would be a widow, struggling to make ends meet, selling her most precious possessions just to keep a roof over her head. Mark had been healthy, active. The aggressive cancer that took him had come out of nowhere, turning their world upside down in a matter of months. Her phone chimed with a notification. Someone was interested in the dress already. The message was brief, asking if the dress was still available and if they could see it today. Eleanor replied quickly, providing her address and suggesting a time in the afternoon. The faster the transaction, the less time she would have to second-guess herself. At precisely 3 o'clock, there was a knock on her door. Eleanor took a deep breath, smoothed down her simple blouse, and went to answer it. She had expected a young bride-to-be, perhaps accompanied by her mother or a friend. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with a tall man in his late 30s, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and dark jeans. "Hello," he said, his voice deeper than she had anticipated. "I'm Daniel Harris. I messaged about the wedding dress." Eleanor blinked in surprise, momentarily lost for words. Yes, of course. Please come in. I'm Eleanor. Eleanor Mitchell." She stepped aside, allowing him to enter her small apartment. Daniel moved with confidence, but there was a gentleness to his demeanor that put her slightly at ease despite her confusion. "I apologize if this seems unusual," Daniel said, seeming to read her thoughts. "The dress isn't for me, obviously." He smiled. a warm, genuine smile that reached his dark brown eyes. "It's for my sister. She's getting married in 2 months, and she's been struggling to find something within her budget. Your dress looked perfect from the photos." "Oh," Eleanor said, feeling a bit foolish for her initial surprise. "Of course, it's right over here." She led him to the living room where she had carefully laid out the dress on her small sofa. Daniel approached it slowly, his expression thoughtful as he examined the detailed beadwork. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "May I?" He gestured toward the dress. Eleanor nodded, and Daniel gently lifted the dress, holding it up to the light coming through the window. His hands were careful, respectful, as if he understood the significance of what he was holding. "My sister is about your size, I think," he said, glancing at Eleanor. "She couldn't come herself because she's working a double shift at the hospital. She's a nurse." Eleanor found herself smiling. "That's admirable. It must be challenging work." Daniel nodded, carefully laying the dress back down. "It is, especially these past few years, but she loves it." He paused, looking at Eleanor with curious eyes. "If you don't mind me asking, why are you selling it? It's a beautiful dress." The question, though innocent, hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She had prepared herself to discuss the details of the dress, its size and condition, but not this, not the why. She began, but her voice caught. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I don't need it anymore." Something in her tone must have conveyed more than her words, because understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes, followed quickly by compassion. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have asked." Eleanor shook her head. "It's all right. It's been 3 years." She picked up a framed photo from the side table, one of the few she still had displayed. It showed her and Mark on their wedding day, both laughing, blissfully unaware of what the future held. "My husband, Mark. He passed away from cancer." Daniel's expression softened further. "I'm truly sorry for your loss, Eleanor." There was something in the way he said her name, something in his eyes that told Eleanor he wasn't just offering empty platitudes. He genuinely meant it. "Thank you," she said, setting the photo back down. "As for the dress, well, times are tough, and sentiment doesn't pay the rent." Daniel nodded, his gaze moving around the small apartment, taking in the worn furniture, the bare walls where pictures once hung. Eleanor felt a flush of embarrassment. She hadn't meant to reveal so much about her circumstances. "I'll take it," Daniel said suddenly, turning back to her. "It's perfect for my sister." "You don't need to check with her first?" Eleanor asked, surprised by his quick decision. Daniel smiled again, that warm smile that seemed to light up his whole face. "I know my sister. She'll love it. And I trust my judgment. How much are you asking for it again?" Eleanor told him the price, already feeling a twinge of regret. Once the dress was gone, that final tangible connection to her wedding day would be lost forever. But the amount would cover her overdue rent with a little left over for groceries. It was a necessity, not a choice. To her surprise, Daniel pulled out his wallet and counted out more cash than she had asked for. "This isn't right," Eleanor said, confused. "It's too much." "The dress is worth more than you're asking," Daniel replied simply. "I did some research before coming. This designer, this quality, you're selling it well below its value." Eleanor stared at the money in his outstretched hand. "I can't accept that. It's too generous." "It's not generosity, it's fairness," Daniel insisted. "Please." Something in his eyes, a sincerity that couldn't be faked, made Eleanor reluctantly accept the money. As their hands briefly touched during the exchange, she felt an unexpected warmth, a small spark that she hadn't experienced in a very long time. "Thank you," she said softly, tucking the money into her pocket. Daniel carefully gathered the dress, and Eleanor helped him place it back in its garment bag. As she zipped it closed, she felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief wash over her. "Your husband," Daniel said hesitantly as she handed him the bag. He must have been very proud to see you in this." The simple statement, delivered with such genuine warmth, brought unexpected tears to Eleanor's eyes. "He was," she whispered. "At least he said he was." "I'm sure he meant it," Daniel replied, his eyes never leaving hers. There was something in his gaze, something intense and searching that made Eleanor's heart beat a little faster. "Thank you for the dress, Eleanor. My sister will treasure it." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Actually, I was wondering, would it be all right if I let you know how it goes? The wedding, I mean? Maybe send you a photo of my sister in the dress?" Eleanor blinked, surprised by the offer. "Yes, I'd like that. I'd like to know it's bringing joy to someone else." Daniel smiled, and for a brief moment the apartment didn't seem quite so empty. "I'll do that then. Take care, Eleanor Mitchell." After he left, Eleanor stood in the middle of her living room, the cash heavy in her pocket, her heart strangely light despite the emptiness of the closet where her wedding dress had hung for the past 3 years. Something about Daniel's visit had shifted something inside her, a tiny crack in the wall she had built around herself since Mark's death. She didn't expect to hear from him again, certainly not beyond perhaps a wedding photo as promised. People made such gestures all the time, well-intentioned in the moment but quickly forgotten in the rush of daily life. But 3 days later, her phone chimed with a message from an unknown number. Eleanor stared at her phone in surprise. The message was simple. "Hello, Eleanor. It's Daniel Harris. Hope you don't mind. I got your number from the contact information on your listing. I wanted to let you know that my sister absolutely loves the dress. She actually cried when she saw it. I thought you might like to know that it's already bringing joy to someone. Hope you're well." She read the message twice, a small smile forming on her lips. It was an unexpected kindness, this follow-up. Most people would have simply taken the dress and moved on with their lives. The fact that Daniel had taken the time to let her know about his sister's reaction touched her in a way she hadn't expected. After a moment's hesitation, she typed back, "Thank you for letting me know. I'm glad the dress has found a good home." She paused, then added, "And yes, I'm well. I hope you are too." The reply came almost immediately. "I am, thank you. Actually, I was wondering if you might be free for coffee sometime. There's something about the dress I'd like to discuss further." Eleanor frowned at the screen. Something about the dress? Had there been an issue she hadn't noticed? A tear or stain, perhaps? Her heart sank at the thought of having to return the money she had already used to pay her rent. "Is there a problem with it?" she typed quickly. "No, no problem at all," came the swift reply. "Nothing like that. It's perfect. Just something I'd like to talk about in person if you're comfortable with that. But no pressure at all." Eleanor hesitated. She hadn't been out for coffee or any social engagement with anyone other than her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, in months. The thought of sitting across from a stranger making conversation felt both foreign and vaguely terrifying. But there was something about Daniel, a gentleness that had put her at ease during their brief meeting. "Okay," she typed before she could change her mind. "When and where?" They agreed to meet the following afternoon at a small cafe not far from Eleanor's apartment. As she got ready the next day, she found herself spending more time than usual on her appearance. She brushed her shoulder-length brown hair until it shone, applied a touch of mascara and lip gloss, and chose a blue blouse that Mark had always said brought out the color of her eyes. The realization that she was putting in effort for a man she barely knew made her pause. It wasn't a date, she reminded herself firmly. It was a conversation about a wedding dress. Nothing more. Daniel was already at the cafe when she arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He stood when he spotted her, that warm smile lighting up his face. "Eleanor," he said, as if her name was something pleasant to say. "I'm glad you could make it. I took the liberty of ordering for you. I hope you like lattes?" "I do, thank you," she replied, sliding into the seat across from him. The cafe was cozy, with soft music playing in the background and the rich aroma of coffee filling the air. It was the kind of place she and Mark used to frequent on lazy Sunday mornings, a lifetime ago. "So," she began, wrapping her hands around the warm mug, "what did you want to discuss about the dress?" Daniel seemed suddenly nervous, running a hand through his dark hair. "Right. About that. I have a confession to make." He met her eyes, his expression earnest. "I don't actually have a sister." Eleanor blinked, her grip on the coffee mug tightening. "I don't understand." "I bought the dress for my business," Daniel explained quickly. "I own a small boutique bridal shop. We specialize in designer dresses at affordable prices, mostly by restoring and reselling pre-owned gowns. When I saw your listing, I recognized the designer immediately. It's a beautiful piece, and in such good condition." "You lied to me?" Eleanor felt a strange mix of confusion and disappointment. The small connection she had felt, the warmth she had experienced in his presence, suddenly seemed built on false pretenses. "I did, and I'm truly sorry," Daniel said, regret evident in his voice. "It's just that in my experience, people are often more comfortable selling personal items to someone who has a genuine need for them, rather than to a business looking to make a profit. But I shouldn't have been dishonest with you." Eleanor took a sip of her coffee, processing this information. She should probably be angry, she thought. Yet the disappointment she felt was more about the fictitious sister who had supposedly loved her dress than about the business transaction itself. "So there's no wedding?" she asked, feeling oddly deflated. "No wedding," Daniel confirmed. "But there will be, for someone. Your dress will help make someone's special day possible, someone who might not otherwise be able to afford a gown of that quality." "That part is true." Eleanor nodded slowly. She could understand the logic even if she didn't appreciate the deception. "Why tell me now?" Daniel's expression became more serious. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you, about our conversation, about why you were selling the dress." He hesitated, then continued. "I lost my wife 5 years ago, car accident. So when you told me about your husband, I felt connected to you somehow, and I couldn't let that connection be based on a lie." The revelation hit Eleanor like a physical force. Another widow, or widower rather. Someone who understood the void, the endless nights, the struggle to piece together a life that no longer made sense. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "about your wife." "Thank you." Her name was Sophia. Daniel's eyes held a familiar shadow, one Eleanor recognized from her own reflection. "It changes you, doesn't it? Losing someone like that." "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "It does." They sat in silence for a moment, a silence that was somehow comfortable despite the circumstances. Two people bound by similar grief, understanding each other in ways others couldn't. "I'd like to offer you a job," Daniel said suddenly, breaking the silence. Eleanor nearly choked on her coffee. "A what?" "A job," Daniel repeated, leaning forward slightly. "At my shop. I need someone with a good eye for detail, someone who understands the emotional significance of these dresses. The previous lady who helped me is retiring, moving to Florida to be closer to her grandchildren. It's part-time, 3 days a week, with potential for more hours if you're interested." "But you don't know anything about me," Eleanor protested. "I could be terrible with customers. I might know nothing about bridal fashion." Daniel's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "I know you took exquisite care of your own wedding dress for 3 years, despite difficult circumstances. I know you treated it with respect and love even when you had to part with it. And I know you're someone who appreciates honesty, even when it's difficult." His smile softened. "As for customer service, we can figure that out as we go. What do you say?" Eleanor stared at him, speechless. The offer was unexpected, yet somehow perfect. Her part-time hours at the library had recently been cut back, and she had been quietly panicking about how to make up the difference. And there was something appealing about working with wedding dresses, about being part of other women's joyful beginnings even as she struggled with her own painful ending. "Could I think about it?" she asked finally. "Of course," Daniel replied without hesitation. "Take all the time you need." They spent the next hour talking, sharing details of their lives before and after their losses. Daniel told her about his shop, how he had started it 2 years after Sophia's death as a way to honor her memory. She had been a seamstress with a passion for helping brides find their perfect dress without going into debt. She always said that the start of a marriage shouldn't be burdened by financial stress, Daniel explained. "So that's my mission now. Beautiful dresses at prices people can actually afford." Eleanor found herself opening up as well, telling him about her job at the library, about the medical bills that had drained her savings, about the small apartment that still sometimes felt too big without Mark in it. "It's the evenings that are hardest," she admitted, surprising herself with her candor. "During the day, there's always something to do, somewhere to be. But at night, the silence gets loud," Daniel finished for her. "I know exactly what you mean." When they finally parted ways, exchanging phone numbers properly this time, Eleanor felt lighter than she had in months. There was something freeing about talking to someone who truly understood, who didn't offer platitudes or look at her with that mixture of pity and discomfort that she had grown accustomed to seeing in others' eyes. As she walked home, her phone buzzed with a text message from Daniel. "Thank you for today. And just to be clear, the job offer stands regardless of whether you want to pursue any sort of friendship with me. No strings attached." Eleanor smiled at the message, appreciating his clarity. She wasn't sure if she was ready for friendship, let alone anything more. The walls she had built around herself since Mark's death had become a comfortable fortress, protecting her from further pain. Yet Daniel had somehow found a small crack in those walls, and she couldn't deny that the light seeping through wasn't entirely unwelcome. That night, as she prepared for bed, Eleanor found herself thinking about the dress, now hanging in Daniel's shop rather than a fictitious sister's closet. There was something poetic about it, she thought. A dress meant for new beginnings, finding a second life after its original purpose had been cut short. Perhaps there was a lesson in there somewhere. She sent a quick text before turning out the light. "About the job. I'd like to come see the shop first, if that's okay." Daniel's reply was immediate. "Of course. How's tomorrow afternoon?" Eleanor typed, "Perfect," and set her phone aside, a small smile playing on her lips as she drifted off to sleep. For the first time in a long while, she found herself looking forward to the next day. The following afternoon, Eleanor stood in front of a charming storefront in a quaint part of the city she rarely visited. The sign above the door read, "Second Chance Bridal" in elegant script, and the display window featured a stunning vintage gown on a mannequin. Even from outside, she could see that the shop was warm and inviting, nothing like the sterile, intimidating bridal salon she had visited when planning her own wedding. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door, a small bell announcing her arrival. Daniel looked up from the counter where he was examining what appeared to be a delicate veil, his face breaking into that now familiar smile when he saw her. "Eleanor," he said warmly, "welcome to Second Chance." Eleanor took in the shop with curious eyes. It was smaller than she had imagined, but every inch of space was thoughtfully utilized. Racks of dresses lined the walls, organized by style rather than size, each one looking as though it had been carefully selected and restored. A large mirror stood at the far end of the room, surrounded by soft, flattering lighting. In one corner, there was a small sitting area with comfortable-looking chairs and a coffee table stacked with bridal magazines. "What do you think?" Daniel asked, setting aside the veil he had been working on. "It's lovely," Eleanor replied honestly. "Not what I expected." "What did you expect?" She shrugged, moving further into the shop. "Something more commercial, I suppose. This feels personal." Daniel smiled, clearly pleased by her observation. "That's exactly what I was going for. Wedding dress shopping should be an intimate experience, not a factory line." As he showed her around, Eleanor noted the attention to detail in everything, from the neatly organized accessories to the tasteful decor. There was a small workshop area at the back of the store where alterations were done, and a cozy office that doubled as a break room. "So what would I be doing exactly?" Eleanor asked as Daniel offered her a seat in the office. "A bit of everything, to be honest," he replied, settling into a chair across from her. "Helping customers find the right dress, assisting with fittings, some basic administrative work. Eventually, if you're interested, you could learn some alteration skills. Maria, who's retiring, has been handling most of that, but I do some of the simpler work myself." "I've never done anything like this before," Eleanor admitted. "My background is in library science. I catalog books, help people find information. Fashion is not exactly my expertise." Daniel leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Do you know what makes someone good at this job, Eleanor? It's not fashion expertise. It's empathy. Understanding that for most women, this isn't just about finding a pretty dress. It's about feeling beautiful on one of the most significant days of their lives." He paused. "From what little I know of you, I think you have that empathy in spades." His words warmed something inside her that had been cold for a long time. "When would you need me to start?" she asked, surprised by her own willingness to consider the offer. "Maria's last day is next Friday. Ideally, you'd have a few days of overlap with her for training, but we can be flexible." Eleanor nodded, thinking about her schedule at the library. "I could do Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. Would that work?" Daniel's face broke into a wide smile. "Does that mean you're accepting the job?" "I think I am," Eleanor replied, a little surprised at herself, "as long as you understand that I know next to nothing about bridal fashion." "Consider it a learning opportunity," Daniel said, extending his hand. "Welcome to Second Chance, Eleanor." As they shook hands, Eleanor felt a small thrill of excitement, a sensation so foreign that it took her a moment to identify it. It had been a long time since she had looked forward to anything new in her life. The following Monday, Eleanor arrived at the shop 15 minutes early, nervous energy propelling her through her morning routine faster than usual. She had spent the weekend researching bridal trends and terminology, determined not to appear completely ignorant on her first day. Maria turned out to be a vivacious woman in her 60s with a shock of silver hair and hands that moved with impressive dexterity despite their arthritic appearance. She greeted Eleanor with a warm hug, as if they were old friends rather than new acquaintances. "So you're the widow," she said bluntly, her accent carrying hints of her Italian heritage. "Daniel told me about you. Said you have good hands and sad eyes. He's right about both." Eleanor wasn't sure how to respond to such a direct assessment. Thank you for training me." Maria waved away her thanks. "Been doing this job for 15 years. About time I passed the torch. Now come, let me show you how we organize the inventory." The day passed in a whirlwind of information: inventory systems, appointment scheduling, basic alteration techniques, and how to use the specialized steamer for delicate fabrics. Daniel drifted in and out, handling administrative tasks in the office and occasionally assisting a bride who came in for a fitting. Eleanor watched him work, noting the easy way he made each woman feel comfortable and special. "He's good with the brides," Maria commented, following Eleanor's gaze. "Not all men have the touch for this business, but Daniel, he understands women, you know?" "He seems to," Eleanor agreed. "It's because of his Sophia," Maria continued, lowering her voice slightly. "She taught him well. Such a tragedy what happened. They were perfect together, those two." Eleanor felt an uncomfortable twinge at Maria's words. Of course, Daniel and his wife had been perfect together, just as she and Mark had been. It was a reminder that what they had lost could never truly be replaced. By the end of the day, Eleanor's head was spinning with new information, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had managed to correctly log 3 new dresses into the inventory system and had even helped Maria with a simple hem adjustment. "You did good," Maria told her as they prepared to close the shop. "You're a quick learner. You'll be fine." Daniel emerged from the office looking pleased. "How was day one?" "Overwhelming," Eleanor admitted, "but in a good way." "Excellent. Can I walk you to your bus stop?" Outside, the early evening air was crisp, hinting at the approaching autumn. They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments before Daniel spoke. "Thank you for taking a chance on the job. I know it's a big change from what you're used to." "It is," Eleanor agreed. "But maybe that's what I need. A change." Daniel glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "After Sophia died, I changed everything. New apartment, new career, new daily routines. I couldn't bear to keep living the same life without her in it." Eleanor nodded, understanding perfectly. "I've done the opposite. Clung to everything familiar, as if changing anything would somehow erase what I had with Mark." "Different ways of coping with the same pain," Daniel observed. "Neither is wrong." They reached the bus stop, and Eleanor turned to face him. "Thank you again for the opportunity. I'll see you on Wednesday?" "Looking forward to it," Daniel replied with a warm smile. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Eleanor continued working her usual shifts at the library while adding 3 days a week at Second Chance. Maria completed her training and departed for Florida with tearful hugs and a promise to call and check on them. Eleanor found herself enjoying the work more than she had anticipated. There was something deeply satisfying about helping a bride find the perfect dress, especially the ones with limited budgets who had resigned themselves to compromising on their dreams. The joy on their faces when they looked in the mirror and saw themselves as they had imagined was genuinely moving. As for Daniel, working alongside him was easier than she had expected. He was respectful of her space, never pushing for more personal conversation than she offered freely, yet always ready to listen when she wanted to talk. They developed a comfortable rapport, each learning the other's habits and preferences in the easy way of coworkers. "You're good at this," Daniel told her one quiet afternoon as they worked together to restore a vintage lace gown. "You have an eye for detail. Maria was right about your hands." Eleanor smiled, carefully attaching a tiny pearl bead to replace one that had fallen off. "I'm enjoying it more than I thought I would. It's nice to be part of something hopeful." Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's why I do it. Every dress that leaves this shop is going to be part of someone's new beginning. There's something healing in that." "Yes," Eleanor agreed softly. "There is." It was on a particularly busy Saturday, about a month into her new job, that Eleanor encountered her first real challenge. A bride named Jessica had come in with her mother and 2 bridesmaids, all of them with strong opinions about what she should wear. The appointment had started pleasantly enough, but as Jessica tried on dress after dress, her expression grew increasingly defeated. "Maybe we should try somewhere else," her mother suggested after the 5th dress. "Somewhere with more current styles." Eleanor saw the hurt flash across Daniel's face before he smoothed his expression into a professional smile. "Of course, if you'd prefer. Although we do get new inventory regularly." "I'd like to try one more," Jessica said quietly, her gaze lingering on a dress in the corner that she had pointed out when they first arrived. "The Empire waist?" Eleanor asked, moving toward the dress in question. "I thought you might like that one." Jessica nodded, ignoring her mother's skeptical expression. "Yes, please." In the fitting room, as Eleanor helped Jessica into the dress, the young woman confessed in a whisper, "I love these vintage styles. My mom thinks they're old-fashioned, but—" She trailed off, looking vulnerable. "It's your wedding," Eleanor said gently. "The most important thing is how you feel in the dress." When Jessica emerged from the fitting room, there was a moment of silence. The dress, a 1970s-inspired design with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing silhouette, suited her perfectly. It complemented her slender frame and brought out the warmth in her complexion. "Oh, Jess," one of the bridesmaids breathed. "You look beautiful." Jessica's mother seemed less convinced, her mouth pinched as she circled her daughter. "It's not what we discussed. And it looks used." "It's been fully restored," Eleanor explained, stepping forward. "Every bead and sequin has been checked, every seam reinforced. It's structurally as sound as a new dress, with the character and craftsmanship you don't find in modern mass-produced gowns." She spoke with a conviction that surprised even herself, fueled by the look of longing on Jessica's face as she gazed at her reflection. "And," Eleanor continued more softly, moving to stand behind Jessica, "look at her face. This is the first dress that's made her light up. Isn't that what matters most?" The mother's expression softened slightly as she met her daughter's eyes in the mirror. "You do look happy, Jess?" In the end, Jessica purchased the dress, beaming as Daniel carefully packaged it for her. After they left, he turned to Eleanor with an impressed look. "That was masterfully handled. You just saved a sale I was sure we'd lost." Eleanor shrugged, but couldn't help feeling pleased. "I just said what I was thinking." "Well, keep thinking like that," Daniel said with a grin. "You're a natural." Later that evening, as they closed up the shop together, Daniel hesitated by the door. "I was wondering if you might want to get dinner, to celebrate your first solo success." Eleanor looked up at him, surprised by the invitation. They had shared coffee a few times after work, but this felt different somehow, more intentional. "Just as friends," Daniel added quickly, perhaps misreading her hesitation. "No pressure." Eleanor found herself nodding before she had fully thought it through. "Yes, I'd like that." As they walked to a nearby restaurant, the evening air crisp around them, Eleanor realized with a start that she was actually looking forward to the meal, to spending time with Daniel outside of work. The realization brought with it a small pang of guilt, as if she were somehow being disloyal to Mark's memory. But as Daniel held the restaurant door open for her, his smile warm and expectant, Eleanor made a conscious decision to set that guilt aside, just for the evening. After all, it was just dinner between friends. Nothing more. At least, that's what she told herself. The restaurant Daniel had chosen was a small Italian place tucked away on a side street. It wasn't fancy, but it had a cozy, intimate atmosphere with checkered tablecloths and candles flickering in wine bottles. The walls were lined with photographs of the Italian countryside, and the air was rich with the scent of garlic and herbs. "I hope this is okay," Daniel said as they were seated at a corner table. "Sophia and I used to come here a lot. The owner, Marco, makes everything from scratch." As if on cue, a robust man with a salt and pepper beard approached their table, his face lighting up when he saw Daniel. "Daniel, it has been too long!" he exclaimed, clapping Daniel on the shoulder. His accent was thick but warm, like the restaurant itself. "Marco, good to see you," Daniel replied with a genuine smile. "This is my friend and colleague Eleanor." Marco turned to Eleanor, his eyes twinkling. "Ah, a beautiful lady. Daniel does not bring friends here often. You must be special." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "It's nice to meet you." "I bring you my best wine on the house," Marco declared before bustling away, leaving no room for protest. "Sorry about that," Daniel said, looking a bit embarrassed. Marco can be enthusiastic. "It's fine," Eleanor assured him, though she couldn't help but wonder about Marco's implication that Daniel rarely brought people here. Was this place special to him because of his wife? And if so, what did it mean that he had brought her here? Marco returned with a bottle of red wine, pouring generous glasses for both of them before once again disappearing to give them privacy. Eleanor took a small sip, the rich flavor warming her from the inside. "So," Daniel said, his eyes meeting hers over the rim of his glass, "tell me something about Eleanor Mitchell that I don't already know." Eleanor considered the question, twirling the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. "I play the piano," she offered finally. "Or at least I used to. I haven't touched one in years." "Really?" Daniel looked genuinely interested. Were you any good? Good enough, Eleanor replied with a small smile. I started lessons when I was 6 and continued through college. I even considered pursuing it professionally for a while, but in the end, I chose a more practical path. The library. Yes, the library. Books were my other love, and they seemed like a more stable career choice. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Do you miss it? Playing, I mean. Eleanor hadn't expected the question, nor the wave of emotion it triggered. Yes, she admitted softly. More than I realized until you asked. Why did you stop? She took another sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. After Mark died, I sold the piano. We had a baby grand that had been a wedding gift from his parents. It took up half our living room, but Mark loved hearing me play. After he was gone, it just sat there, gathering dust, and I needed the money for medical bills. Daniel's expression was one of gentle understanding. That must have been hard letting it go. It was just a thing, Eleanor said, trying to sound more detached than she felt. Just wood and strings. The memories are still there. Still, Daniel said quietly, I'm sorry you had to make that choice. Marco returned to take their orders, his boisterous presence momentarily lightening the mood. They both ordered pasta dishes on his recommendation, and he promised they would not be disappointed. Your turn, Eleanor said after Marco had left. Tell me something I don't know about you. Daniel leaned back in his chair, considering. I used to be a corporate lawyer, he said finally. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Seriously? That's unexpected. He laughed at her expression. Hard to imagine, right? But yes, I spent 5 years in a suit and tie, working for a firm that represented some of the biggest companies in the city. The pay was excellent, the hours were brutal, and I hated almost every minute of it. What made you choose that career in the first place? My father, Daniel said simply. He was a lawyer. His father was a lawyer. It was just expected. And I was good at it in a technical sense. I understood the law, could argue a case effectively, but it never felt right. And Sophia? What did she think about your career? A fond smile crossed Daniel's face. She called me a corporate sellout when we first met. She was working at a small alterations shop at the time, making barely enough to get by, but she loved what she did. She used to say that I spent my days helping rich people get richer, while she spent hers helping regular people feel beautiful. He chuckled at the memory. She wasn't entirely wrong. She sounds like she was quite a woman, Eleanor said, ignoring the small twist of something that felt uncomfortably like jealousy in her chest. She was, Daniel agreed. She's the one who encouraged me to leave law after she died. Not directly, of course, but I kept thinking about all the times she'd told me life was too short to spend it doing something that didn't bring me joy. Their food arrived, steaming plates of pasta that looked and smelled incredible. They both thanked Marco, who beamed with pride before leaving them to enjoy their meal. This is amazing, Eleanor said after her first bite, the rich tomato sauce and perfectly cooked pasta momentarily making her forget everything else. Told you, Daniel replied with a smile. Best Italian food in the city. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, savoring the food. Eleanor found herself relaxing, the wine and the warm atmosphere working together to ease the tension she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. Can I ask you something personal? Daniel asked suddenly, setting down his fork. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. You can ask. I might not answer. Fair enough, he said with a small smile. I was wondering, what was Mark like? If that's too painful to talk about, I completely understand. The question caught Eleanor off guard. People usually avoided mentioning Mark directly, as if saying his name might somehow break her. But Daniel's question didn't feel intrusive. It felt like genuine interest. He was kind, she began slowly. Genuinely kind in a way that's rare. He taught high school science, and his students adored him because he made even the most complex concepts accessible. He had this ability to see the best in people, to draw it out of them. She smiled at a memory. He was also incredibly stubborn. Once he set his mind to something, there was no changing it. "He sounds like a good man," Daniel said softly. "He was," Eleanor confirmed. "The best I've ever known." She hesitated, then added, "What about Sophia? What was she like?" Daniel's eyes grew distant, though his smile remained. Passionate about everything. Her work, her beliefs, the people she loved. She had this infectious energy that made you want to care as deeply as she did. He chuckled. "She was also the most brutally honest person I've ever met. No filter whatsoever." "I can see why you loved her," Eleanor said. "Just as I can see why you loved Mark," Daniel replied, his eyes meeting hers again. There was a moment of connection, a shared understanding that didn't need words. It struck Eleanor then how strange and wonderful it was to be sitting across from someone who truly understood the depth of what she had lost. Not just a spouse, but a future, a shared life, dreams that would never come to fruition. "Thank you," she said suddenly. Daniel looked puzzled. "For what?" "For asking about Mark. Most people avoid mentioning him as if they're afraid I'll fall apart at the sound of his name." "I know exactly what you mean," Daniel said with a nod. "After Sophia died, people would literally stop talking when I entered a room if they had been discussing anything related to her, as if grief is contagious. Or as if we might have forgotten, and they don't want to remind us," Eleanor added wryly. "As if we could forget," Daniel replied, his voice soft but firm. They finished their meal, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, favorite books, movies they'd enjoyed, places they'd traveled. By the time Marco brought them coffee and tiramisu to share, Eleanor realized she was having a genuinely good time, something that had felt out of reach for so long. "I have a confession to make," Daniel said as they lingered over the last of their coffee. "I saw your wedding dress before I responded to your listing." Eleanor tilted her head, confused. "What do you mean?" "I was at your wedding," Daniel explained. "Well, not the ceremony itself, but the reception. Sophia was the one who altered your dress, remember?" Eleanor's eyes widened in shock. "That was Sophia? The seamstress who did the last-minute alterations when I lost weight from pre-wedding stress?" Daniel nodded, a smile playing at his lips. "She came home that day talking about this beautiful bride who was marrying a high school science teacher. She was impressed by how down-to-earth you both were, especially compared to some of the bridezillas she usually dealt with." "I can't believe this," Eleanor said, struggling to process this unexpected connection. "So when you saw my listing, I recognized the dress immediately," Daniel confirmed. "And your name. It felt like, I don't know, like fate or something. Though I'm not sure I believe in that." "I don't either," Eleanor said automatically, though something about this coincidence made her wonder. "Well, believe in it or not, I'm glad I saw that listing," Daniel said, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart beat a little faster. "I'm glad I got to meet the woman Sophia spoke so highly of all those years ago." The moment was interrupted by Marco, who came to clear their empty cups and ask if they needed anything else. By the time he left, the intimate atmosphere had shifted slightly, though Eleanor could still feel the warmth of Daniel's gaze. "It's getting late," she said, glancing at her watch. "I should probably head home." Daniel nodded, signaling for the check. Despite Eleanor's protests, he insisted on paying, reminding her that he had invited her to celebrate her success at the shop. Outside, the night had grown cool, and Eleanor pulled her light jacket tighter around herself. Daniel noticed and immediately removed his own jacket, draping it over her shoulders before she could object. "I'm fine, really," she began, but the warmth of the jacket and the faint scent of his cologne were too comforting to resist. "I'll walk you to your bus stop," Daniel said, falling into step beside her. They walked in comfortable silence, the streets quiet at this hour. The restaurant wasn't far from Eleanor's usual stop, and they reached it all too quickly. "Thank you for dinner," Eleanor said, suddenly feeling awkward as they stood waiting for her bus. "I had a really nice time." "So did I," Daniel replied. He hesitated, then added, "Maybe we could do it again sometime?" The question hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than its simple words suggested. Eleanor found herself wanting to say yes, to explore whatever this connection between them was. But the guilt was there too, the feeling that she was somehow betraying Mark by enjoying another man's company. "I'd like that," she said finally, surprising herself with her honesty. The relief and pleasure that crossed Daniel's face made something warm bloom in her chest. He reached out and briefly squeezed her hand, the touch sending an unexpected jolt through her. "Great," he said simply, stepping back as her bus approached. "I'll see you at work on Monday." As Eleanor boarded the bus, she couldn't help but glance back at Daniel, standing on the sidewalk watching her go. He raised a hand in farewell, and she returned the gesture, feeling as though something significant had just occurred, though she couldn't quite define what it was. That night, as she prepared for bed, Eleanor found herself thinking about the evening, the food, the conversation, the revelation about their unexpected past connection. But mostly, she thought about the way Daniel had looked at her, as if he saw her completely, grief and all, and still found something worth looking at. For the first time in a very long time, Eleanor fell asleep with a smile on her face, the weight of her grief momentarily lightened by the promise of something new. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor and Daniel fell into a comfortable rhythm, both at work and outside of it. Their dinner became not a one-time event, but the first of many. Sometimes they went to Marco's, where the exuberant owner always greeted them with increasing enthusiasm, clearly pleased by the developing relationship. Other times, they tried new restaurants, discovering shared tastes and playfully debating their differences. At the shop, they worked seamlessly together, anticipating each other's needs and complementing each other's strengths. Eleanor's eye for detail and empathetic approach with brides made her a natural, while Daniel's business acumen and technical skills kept the operation running smoothly. Eleanor had kept her job at the library, unable to completely let go of the security it provided, but she found herself looking forward to her days at Second Chance more and more. There was something deeply satisfying about helping brides find their perfect dress, about being part of their joy. But even as she found herself smiling more, laughing more, enjoying life more, there was a persistent shadow that followed her. Guilt, heavy and insidious, crept in during quiet moments. She caught herself checking her reflection before Daniel arrived at the shop, adjusting her hair or adding a touch of lipstick, then immediately feeling ashamed, as if Mark were watching her preparation with hurt in his eyes. On a rainy Tuesday evening, Eleanor sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold beside her as she flipped through a photo album she hadn't opened in months. Pictures of her and Mark stared back at her. Their first vacation together, the day they moved into their apartment, his birthday celebration just months before his diagnosis. His smile, so bright and confident, seemed to follow her as she turned the pages. "Am I betraying you?" she whispered to the smiling image. "By being happy again? By enjoying someone else's company?" The photo, of course, didn't answer. Mark's frozen smile remained unchanged, captured in a moment of joy that could never evolve or respond. The realization hit Eleanor with sudden clarity. This wasn't Mark. It was just an image, a memory. The real Mark, the man who had loved her with his whole heart, would never begrudge her happiness. With tears in her eyes, she closed the album, running her fingers over the worn cover. She wasn't ready to put it away, not yet, but perhaps it was time to make room on her shelves and in her heart for new memories alongside the treasured old ones. The next day at the shop, Eleanor found herself alone for the morning as Daniel had a meeting with a supplier. She was organizing the new inventory when the bell above the door chimed, announcing a customer. A young woman entered, her face pinched with anxiety. She was petite, with delicate features and dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. "Welcome to Second Chance," Eleanor greeted her with a warm smile. "How can I help you today?" "I need a wedding dress," the woman said, her voice tight. "Something simple, nothing too bridal, if that makes sense, and it needs to be ready in 2 weeks." Eleanor blinked in surprise. 2 weeks was an incredibly tight time frame, even for minimal alterations. "That's a very short time," she said gently. "May I ask when your wedding is?" The woman's chin trembled slightly before she squared her shoulders. 3 weeks from Saturday. It wasn't planned. My fiancé, he's being deployed overseas. We were going to wait until he came back, but with everything happening in the world right now..." She trailed off, her composure cracking slightly. "I understand," Eleanor said, feeling a wave of sympathy. "Let's see what we can do. I'm Eleanor, by the way." "Lily," the woman replied, visibly relaxing a little. "Thank you. I've been to 3 shops already, and they all said they couldn't help me with such short notice." Eleanor led Lily further into the shop, asking questions about her preferences and the type of ceremony they were planning. It would be small, just family and close friends at Lily's parents' house. Her fiancé, James, was in the army and had received unexpected deployment orders just a week ago. "We've been engaged for 2 years," Lily explained as Eleanor began selecting dresses that might work. "We were saving for a big wedding next summer. But now..." She blinked back tears. "I just want to be his wife before he goes. I don't care about the perfect dress or flowers or any of it. I just want to be married to him." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Then let's find you a dress that will make you feel beautiful when you say your vows, no matter the circumstances." They spent the next hour with Lily trying on various dresses. Some were too elaborate, others not special enough. Eleanor began to worry that they wouldn't find something suitable among their current inventory. "Let me check something in the back," she said after Lily's 6th unsuccessful try. "I think we received a dress last week that hasn't been put out on the floor yet. It might be perfect for you." In the storeroom, Eleanor searched through the newly arrived inventory, looking for a simple but elegant dress she recalled Daniel mentioning. As she moved a large garment bag aside, another caught her eye. It was older than the others, the bag slightly yellowed with age. Curious, she unzipped it partially and froze. It was her wedding dress. The dress she had sold to Daniel all those weeks ago, the one that had brought him into her life. She hadn't seen it since that day in her apartment, had deliberately avoided asking about it at the shop. Yet here it was, carefully preserved in the back room. With trembling hands, she zipped the bag back up, pushing aside the rush of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. This wasn't the time. Lily was waiting, anxious and hopeful, needing her help. Eleanor found the dress she had been looking for and returned to the main floor, her professional smile firmly in place despite the turmoil inside her. "This just came in," she told Lily, presenting the dress. "It's a 1960s design, very simple but with beautiful detailing on the bodice. I think it would suit your frame perfectly." Lily's eyes lit up as she touched the soft fabric. "It's lovely," she said. "Can I try it?" The dress did indeed fit Lily beautifully, requiring only minor alterations that could easily be completed within the tight time frame. When Lily looked at herself in the mirror, her anxious expression transformed into one of quiet joy. "It's perfect," she whispered. "James will love it." As Eleanor helped Lily out of the dress and discussed the alterations needed, the bell chimed again. Daniel entered, shaking raindrops from his umbrella. "Sorry I'm late," he said, setting down a box he was carrying. The meeting ran long, and then traffic was a nightmare with the rain. He noticed Lily and immediately extended his hand. "Hello, I'm Daniel, the owner." After introductions were made and Lily had paid a deposit for the dress, promising to return in a week for a fitting, Eleanor began to process the paperwork for the alterations. Daniel moved around the shop, returning samples to their proper places and straightening displays that had been disturbed during Lily's visit. "You seem to connect with her," he observed once Lily had left. "Did you find her something suitable?" Eleanor nodded, explaining Lily's situation. "It's a rush job, but I think we can manage it. The dress only needs minor adjustments." "Good instincts," Daniel said with approval. "Military weddings often come together quickly. We've done several over the years." They worked in companionable silence for a while, but Eleanor could feel the question burning inside her, demanding to be asked. "Daniel," she began, her voice quieter than she intended. "My wedding dress is in the back room." He paused in his work, turning to face her. "Yes," he said simply. "Why isn't it on the sales floor?" The question came out more accusatory than she had meant it to sound. Daniel set down the inventory clipboard he had been holding and approached her, his expression careful. "I wasn't sure if you were ready to see it being worn by someone else," he said softly. "I thought it might be painful for you." The consideration behind his action touched her deeply. "You've been keeping it back there all this time just to spare my feelings?" "It seemed like the right thing to do," Daniel replied with a small shrug. "I planned to put it out eventually once enough time had passed, or to ask you when you felt ready." Eleanor moved toward the storeroom, gesturing for Daniel to follow. Once inside, she located the garment bag again and unzipped it fully, revealing the dress in its entirety. It looked smaller somehow, less significant than it had in her memory. "I spent so long avoiding looking at it, thinking about it," she said, running her fingers over the delicate lace. "But now, seeing it here, it's just a dress, isn't it? A beautiful one with beautiful memories attached to it, but still just fabric and thread." Daniel stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, but not touching. "It's whatever you need it to be," he said. "A treasure to be preserved or a memory to be passed on to someone new." Eleanor took a deep breath, her decision crystallizing. "I think it's time for it to become part of someone else's story. It's already brought me more than I ever expected." She glanced at Daniel, her meaning clear. "Are you sure?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "I am," she said firmly. "Mark would want that. He never liked things going to waste, especially beautiful things that could bring joy." Daniel's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with her own. It was the first time he had initiated such contact, and the warmth of his palm against hers sent a current through her body. "I've been wanting to ask you something," he said, his voice low, "but I wasn't sure if it was too soon, if you were ready." Eleanor's heart began to race, her breath catching slightly. "Ask me what?" "My sister's getting married next month in Vermont. It's a weekend event, at this beautiful old inn by a lake." He hesitated, his eyes never leaving hers. "I was wondering if you might want to come with me, as my date." The word date hung in the air between them, explicit and unavoidable. Not colleagues, not friends, but something more deliberate, something with potential and promise. Eleanor's first instinct was to hesitate, to find a reason to say no, but the voice that had been holding her back, keeping her tethered to the past, was quieter now. In its place was a new voice, one that sounded remarkably like Mark at his most encouraging. "Live, Eleanor. You deserve to live." "I'd like that," she said, squeezing Daniel's hand. "Yes, I'll go with you." The smile that bloomed on Daniel's face was like the sun breaking through clouds, radiant and warming. Before Eleanor realized what was happening, he had pulled her into a hug, his arms strong and secure around her. She found herself returning the embrace, her cheek resting against his chest, the steady beat of his heart a comforting rhythm beneath her ear. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. "For what?" she asked, not pulling away. "For being brave enough to try again," Daniel replied. "I know how hard that is." When they finally separated, Eleanor felt a shift within herself, as if something long frozen had begun to thaw. The guilt was still there, a shadow at the edges of her consciousness, but it no longer felt overwhelming. It was simply part of her, like the grief that would always accompany her love for Mark. But perhaps there was room for new feelings too, growing alongside the old ones, not replacing, but complementing, expanding her heart rather than dividing it. As they returned to the main shop floor, Eleanor cast one last glance at her wedding dress, still visible through the open storeroom door. "Let's put it on display," she said decisively. "It deserves to be seen, to become part of someone else's happiest day." Daniel nodded, understanding the significance of her request. "We'll do it together," he promised. "Tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word itself felt like a gift, a promise of things to come. For the first time in 3 years, Eleanor found herself looking forward not just to the next day, but to the possibility of many days after that, unfolding with new purpose and unexpected joy. Eleanor stood in front of her closet, surveying its contents with a growing sense of panic. The weekend in Vermont was just 2 days away, and she was no closer to deciding what to pack than she had been a week ago when Daniel first extended the invitation. "It's not that formal," he had assured her. "Just a nice dress for the actual ceremony and casual clothes for the rest of the weekend. The inn is pretty relaxed." But what constituted a nice dress for a wedding at a lakeside inn in Vermont? And what kind of casual clothes were appropriate for meeting Daniel's entire family for the first time? Eleanor hadn't attended a wedding since her own, hadn't packed for a weekend away with a man since the last anniversary trip she and Mark had taken before his diagnosis. With a sigh, she reached for her phone and called the one person she knew would give her honest advice. 10 minutes later, Mrs. Patterson, her elderly neighbor, was standing in her bedroom critically examining the options Eleanor had laid out on the bed. "This one," she said decisively, pointing to a knee-length dress in a deep teal color. "It's elegant without trying too hard, and the color suits you. And take that cardigan for the evening. It gets chilly in the mountains, even in summer." Eleanor nodded, grateful for the decisive input. At 78, Mrs. Patterson had a no-nonsense approach to life that Eleanor had come to rely on since Mark's death. She had been the one to bring casseroles during those first awful weeks, to remind Eleanor to eat, to simply sit with her in silence when words were impossible. "He's a good man, your Daniel," Mrs. Patterson remarked as she helped Eleanor fold the chosen items into a weekend bag. "He's not my Daniel," Eleanor protested automatically, though the words rang hollow even to her own ears. Mrs. Patterson gave her a knowing look. "Not yet, perhaps, but I haven't seen you glow like this in a very long time, dear. It suits you." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "It's just a weekend, a friend's wedding." "His sister's wedding," Mrs. Patterson corrected, "to which he has invited you as his date. That's not nothing, Eleanor." It wasn't nothing, Eleanor had to admit. In the weeks since Daniel had asked her to accompany him, their relationship had shifted subtly but unmistakably. The casual touches had increased, a hand at the small of her back as they moved around the shop, fingers brushing as they passed items between them, a lingering hug at the end of the day. They hadn't kissed, not yet, but Eleanor found herself thinking about it, wondering what it would be like. "I'm nervous," she confessed to Mrs. Patterson. "It's been so long since I've done anything like this. What if I've forgotten how?" The older woman's expression softened. "Oh, my dear, some things the heart never forgets. Just be yourself. That's who he's interested in after all." On Friday morning, Daniel picked Eleanor up in his car, loading her bag alongside his own in the trunk. The drive to Vermont would take about 4 hours, and they had decided to make a day of it, stopping for lunch along the way and arriving in time for the rehearsal dinner that evening. "You look beautiful," Daniel said as she settled into the passenger seat, his eyes warm as they took in the simple sundress she had chosen for the drive. "Thank you," Eleanor replied, feeling a flutter of pleasure at the compliment. "You look pretty good yourself." Daniel grinned, starting the car. He was dressed casually in khaki shorts and a light blue button-down that brought out the warmth in his tan. "Ready for an adventure?" And it did feel like an adventure, Eleanor thought as they drove north, leaving the city behind for rolling countryside. The conversation flowed easily between them, moving from books they had recently read to childhood memories to plans for the shop. When they stopped for lunch at a charming roadside diner, Eleanor found herself laughing more freely than she had in years. "Tell me about your sister," she requested as they continued their journey, the landscape growing more mountainous. "What's she like?" "Rebecca is a force of nature," Daniel said with evident affection. "She's 3 years younger than me, but sometimes it feels like she's the older one, always taking charge, always knowing exactly what she wants. Her fiancé Tom is the perfect match for her, calm, steady, able to stand his ground when it matters, but wise enough to let her lead the rest of the time." "How did they meet?" "At a charity event. Tom is a pediatric surgeon, and Rebecca runs a non-profit that provides art therapy for children with serious illnesses. They connected over their shared passion for helping kids." Daniel smiled. "Rebecca says she knew he was the one when she saw him kneeling on the floor of the children's ward, having a very serious conversation with a 5-year-old about the merits of different superhero powers." "They sound wonderful," Eleanor said, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach at the thought of meeting these accomplished, put-together people. Would they look at her and see only what she lacked? A career as impressive as theirs? The easy confidence that came with knowing your place in the world? As if sensing her anxiety, Daniel reached across the console to squeeze her hand. "They're going to love you," he said softly, "just like I." He stopped abruptly, clearing his throat. "They're good people, is what I mean. No pretensions." Eleanor squeezed his hand in return, her heart racing at what he had almost said. Did he love her? Was that possible after such a relatively short time? And if he did, was she ready to hear it? The inn, when they arrived, was everything a Vermont country retreat should be. A sprawling white clapboard structure with green shutters, surrounded by manicured lawns that sloped down to the glittering lake beyond. Pots of vibrant flowers decorated the wide front porch, and Adirondack chairs were arranged in conversational groupings, some already occupied by wedding guests. "Daniel!" a woman's voice called out as they parked. Eleanor looked up to see a slender, dark-haired woman hurrying toward them, her face alight with joy. Rebecca, Eleanor realized, recognizing the same warm eyes that Daniel had, though his sister's features were more delicate, more animated. Daniel embraced his sister tightly, lifting her slightly off the ground in his enthusiasm. "Bex, how's the bride-to-be holding up?" "Better now that you're here," Rebecca replied, punching his arm affectionately before turning her attention to Eleanor. "And you must be Eleanor. I've heard so much about you." Before Eleanor could respond, she found herself enveloped in a warm hug. "I'm so glad you came," Rebecca continued, pulling back to look at her. "Daniel's been absolutely impossible lately, checking his phone every 5 minutes to see if you've texted." "Rebecca," Daniel groaned, looking embarrassed. "What?" "It's true," his sister replied unrepentantly. "Now come on, both of you. Tom's parents just arrived and Mom is having a minor meltdown about the seating arrangements for tomorrow." As they followed Rebecca into the inn, Daniel leaned close to Eleanor's ear. "I apologize in advance for my family," he murmured. "They have no concept of boundaries." Eleanor smiled, finding his discomfort endearing. "It's nice," she said honestly. "The closeness, I mean. You're lucky to have that." The rehearsal dinner was a casual affair, held on the inn's back terrace overlooking the lake. Twinkling lights were strung overhead, and long tables were arranged family-style, encouraging conversation and connection. Eleanor found herself seated between Daniel and his mother, Catherine, an elegant woman in her 60s, whose sharp wit and keen observations reminded Eleanor of Mrs. Patterson. "So you work at Daniel's shop," Catherine said as they were served the main course, a delicious, locally sourced chicken dish. How are you finding it?" "I love it, actually," Eleanor replied, surprised by the realization as she said it. "There's something very rewarding about helping someone find the perfect dress for such an important day." Catherine nodded, her perceptive eyes studying Eleanor's face. "Daniel tells me you were a librarian before." "I still am, part-time," Eleanor clarified. "I've worked at the Central Library for almost a decade." "A librarian and a bridal consultant?" Catherine mused. "Both professions that help people find what they're looking for in different ways. You must be very good at understanding people's needs." Eleanor had never thought of it that way, but the observation felt oddly right. "I suppose that's true," she said thoughtfully. "I've always enjoyed connecting people with the right book, something that will speak to them or help them or simply bring them joy. Wedding dresses aren't so different in that respect." Catherine smiled, a warm, genuine expression that transformed her face and reminded Eleanor strongly of Daniel. "Well, whatever you're doing at that shop, please keep doing it. I haven't seen my son this happy in a very long time." The evening progressed pleasantly, with toasts and laughter and the easy camaraderie of a family celebrating an impending union. Eleanor found herself relaxing as the hours passed, drawn into conversations and made to feel welcome by Daniel's extended family. His cousins shared embarrassing stories from their childhood. His uncle insisted on teaching her the proper way to play horseshoes, and Rebecca's fiancé, Tom, engaged her in a spirited debate about the merits of different literary adaptations. Throughout it all, Daniel remained a steady presence at her side, occasionally resting his hand on the small of her back or catching her eye across the table with a private smile that made her heart skip. As the evening wound down and guests began drifting back to their rooms, Daniel suggested a walk along the lake. The night was clear, a canopy of stars visible above them in a way that was impossible in the city. The air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of pine and fresh water. "Your family is wonderful," Eleanor said as they strolled along the shoreline, their fingers loosely intertwined. "Thank you for including me in this." "Thank you for coming," Daniel replied, squeezing her hand gently. "I was nervous about asking you, afraid it might be too much, too soon." Eleanor stopped walking, turning to face him. The moonlight silvered the edges of his profile, casting half his face in shadow. "Is it?" she asked softly. "Too soon?" Daniel's eyes found hers, searching. "Not for me," he said finally, "but I need to know if it is for you." Eleanor considered the question, not with her head but with her heart. The guilt that had been her constant companion for so long was still there, but it had changed shape, become less sharp-edged. What would Mark want for her? The answer came with absolute clarity. He would want her to be happy. "No," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "It's not too soon." Daniel stepped closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Eleanor," he said, her name sounding like a prayer on his lips. "I want to kiss you. Very much. But only if—" She didn't let him finish, rising on her tiptoes to press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing the waters of this new territory. But then Daniel's arms slipped around her waist, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened, becoming something more potent, more urgent. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Eleanor felt a curious mixture of emotions, exhilaration, tenderness, a touch of sadness for all that had led them to this moment, and overwhelming gratitude that they had found each other despite the odds. "Wow," Daniel said softly, his forehead resting against hers. Eleanor laughed, the sound floating across the still water of the lake. "Yeah," she agreed. "Wow." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the stars bearing silent witness to this new beginning. Eleanor knew there would be more difficult moments ahead, more navigating of the complex emotions that came with loving again after loss. But for now, in this perfect moment by the lake, she allowed herself to simply feel the joy of connection, of possibility, of life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. And somewhere, she thought, Mark was smiling. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, momentarily disoriented until the events of the previous day came flooding back. The drive to Vermont, meeting Daniel's family, the rehearsal dinner, and that kiss by the lake, a perfect moonlit moment that had left her breathless and smiling. She stretched languidly, enjoying the softness of the inn's luxurious sheets. Daniel had walked her to her door after their lakeside interlude, kissing her again, more briefly but no less sweetly, before reluctantly bidding her good night. They had separate rooms, a thoughtful arrangement that Eleanor appreciated. Neither of them was ready to rush into the physical aspect of their relationship, both understanding the weight of what was developing between them. A gentle knock at the door roused her from her reflections. Wrapping herself in the plush robe provided by the inn, she crossed the room and opened the door to find Rebecca standing there, already dressed in jeans and a casual blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Good morning," Daniel's sister said brightly. "I was hoping to steal you for breakfast before the wedding chaos begins. The ceremony's not until 2, but things get pretty hectic around here once the hair and makeup people arrive." "Oh," Eleanor said, surprised but pleased by the invitation. "Yes, I'd love that. Just give me 15 minutes to get ready?" Rebecca beamed. "Perfect. I'll wait in the lobby." 20 minutes later, Eleanor and Rebecca were seated at a small cafe in the nearby town, mugs of steaming coffee before them and orders placed for omelets and pastries. "I hope you don't mind me kidnapping you," Rebecca said, stirring cream into her coffee. "I wanted a chance to talk to you one-on-one before everything gets crazy, and to thank you." "Thank me?" Eleanor asked, puzzled. "For what?" Rebecca's expression softened. "For Daniel, for bringing back his smile. After Sophia died, there was a long time when I thought I'd never see my brother truly happy again. He went through the motions, built the business, showed up at family events, but there was always something missing. Until you." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm under Rebecca's direct gaze. "I haven't done anything special," she protested. "We've just connected over our shared experiences." "Don't underestimate how rare that is," Rebecca said, leaning forward. "Finding someone who understands your grief, who doesn't expect you to get over it or move on in some socially acceptable time frame, who knows that the person you lost will always be part of you." Eleanor nodded, touched by Rebecca's insight. "It does make a difference," she admitted, "not having to explain or apologize for the complicated feelings." "Sophia was one of my best friends," Rebecca continued, a wistful smile playing on her lips. "We were close even before she met Daniel. She was the first person I called when Tom proposed, did you know that? Even before my parents or Daniel." "Daniel mentioned that you were close," Eleanor said softly. "I'm sorry for your loss, too." Rebecca reached across the table to squeeze Eleanor's hand gratefully. "Thank you. It's been 5 years, but I still find myself picking up the phone to call her sometimes. She would have been my maid of honor tomorrow." She paused, blinking back unexpected tears. "But she would also be the first person to celebrate Daniel finding happiness again. She was like that, generous to her core." Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As they began to eat, Rebecca skillfully steered the discussion to lighter topics, the details of the upcoming ceremony, amusing anecdotes about the relatives Eleanor had met the night before, recommendations for things to see and do in the area if she and Daniel had time before heading back to the city. "There's a beautiful hiking trail that leads to a waterfall about a mile from the inn," Rebecca suggested. "Daniel knows it well. We used to explore up there as kids when our family would visit in the summers." The mention of childhood vacations led to more stories, and Eleanor found herself drawn into the warm tapestry of Daniel's family history. By the time they finished their meal, she felt she had gained not just a better understanding of Daniel's background, but a genuine friendship with his sister. "We should head back," Rebecca said, glancing at her watch. "My bridesmaids will be arriving soon, and God help us all if my mother has to coordinate them without me." As they walked back toward the inn, Rebecca linked her arm through Eleanor's, a casual gesture of camaraderie. "I'm really glad Daniel brought you this weekend," she said earnestly, "and not just for his sake. I have a feeling we're going to be great friends, Eleanor Mitchell." The prediction warmed Eleanor's heart more than she would have expected. Her circle of close friends had contracted after Mark's death, many unable to navigate the change in her circumstances or uncomfortable with the persistent nature of her grief. The possibility of a new friendship, especially one with someone who understood loss as Rebecca did, was unexpectedly welcome. When they returned to the inn, the atmosphere had indeed transformed from the relaxed gathering of the previous evening to the organized chaos of wedding preparations. Flower arrangements were being set up on the lawn where the ceremony would take place. Staff were arranging chairs in neat rows, and several women Eleanor assumed were the bridesmaids were congregating in the lobby, garment bags in hand. "Eleanor!" Daniel's voice called from across the room. He was coming down the main staircase, casually dressed but freshly showered, his hair still damp. The smile that lit his face when he saw her made something flutter in her chest. "I see Rebecca managed to steal you away," he said as he approached, bending to kiss her cheek in a gesture that felt both new and somehow familiar. "We had a lovely breakfast," Eleanor replied, hyper-aware of Rebecca's knowing smile beside her. "And now I need to go transform into a bride," Rebecca announced. "Eleanor, thank you for the company this morning. Daniel, don't you dare be late to the ceremony. Mom will have a fit." After Rebecca had been swept away by her waiting bridesmaids, Daniel turned to Eleanor, a soft expression in his eyes. "Sleep well?" he asked, reaching for her hand. "Very," she replied, letting her fingers intertwine with his. "Your sister is wonderful, by the way." "She likes you," Daniel observed. "I can tell. She doesn't usually make the effort to get to know my—" He paused, seeming unsure how to finish the sentence. "Your what?" Eleanor asked, a teasing note in her voice. Daniel's smile turned slightly bashful. "I was going to say dates, but that doesn't seem adequate. Girlfriend sounds like we're in high school. Partner seems premature. How about Eleanor?" she suggested. "I'm just me, whatever label does or doesn't apply." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Eleanor it is then. Perfect, unclassifiable Eleanor." His expression grew more serious. "About last night?" "Yes," she prompted when he hesitated. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay with everything. That it wasn't too much, too fast. I know this weekend is a lot, meeting my entire family, the wedding emotions, our development." Eleanor appreciated his consideration, the way he always seemed to check in with her feelings rather than assuming. "I'm more than okay," she assured him. "Last night was—" She searched for the right word. "Beautiful." The relief and joy that crossed Daniel's face made her heart swell. "Good," he said simply, "because I'd very much like to kiss you again at the earliest opportunity." Eleanor laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. "I think that could be arranged." They spent the morning exploring the inn's grounds, walking hand in hand along the lakeshore and finding a secluded spot under a willow tree where Daniel made good on his promise to kiss her again, several times in fact, each more intoxicating than the last. Eleanor marveled at how natural it felt to be in his arms, how right, despite all the years and losses that had shaped them both. As the time for the ceremony approached, they returned to their respective rooms to change. Eleanor took special care with her appearance, applying makeup with a lighter hand than usual and styling her hair in soft waves that framed her face. The teal dress that Mrs. Patterson had recommended fit perfectly, skimming her curves without being too revealing, the color bringing out the blue in her eyes. Looking at herself in the mirror, Eleanor barely recognized the woman staring back at her. It wasn't just the dress or the makeup, it was the light in her eyes. the slight flush in her cheeks, the way she held herself. She looked alive in a way she hadn't in years. A knock at the door announced Daniel's arrival. When she opened it, the appreciative look in his eyes confirmed her own impression. "You are absolutely stunning," he said, his voice slightly husky. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Eleanor replied, taking in his charcoal gray suit and blue tie. He looked handsome and distinguished, and the pride in his eyes as he offered her his arm made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The ceremony was held on the lawn overlooking the lake, white chairs arranged in neat rows and a flower-covered arbor serving as the focal point. The weather was perfect, sunny, but not too hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of roses and fresh-cut grass. As they took their seats among the other guests, Eleanor felt a momentary pang, remembering her own wedding day. The weather had been similar, though the setting had been different. A small church in the neighborhood where she had grown up, filled with friends and family, Mark waiting for her at the altar with that brilliant smile that had always made her heart skip. Daniel seemed to sense her brief melancholy, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. "You okay?" he murmured. She nodded, grateful for his perception. "Just a memory, a good one." He nodded in understanding, his thumb tracing soothing circles on the back of her hand. No judgment, no discomfort with her momentary connection to her past, just acceptance and support. The music began, signaling the start of the ceremony. The bridesmaids processed down the aisle first, each in a flattering shade of lavender. Then the traditional wedding march played, and all the guests rose as Rebecca appeared on her father's arm. She was radiant in a sleek, simple gown that perfectly suited her slender frame, her dark hair adorned with a crown of tiny white flowers. The joy on her face as she caught sight of Tom waiting for her made Eleanor's throat tight with emotion. Throughout the ceremony, Daniel kept hold of Eleanor's hand, their fingers intertwined as they witnessed the exchange of vows. The words were traditional but spoken with such evident sincerity that they felt fresh and powerful. When the officiant pronounced the couple husband and wife, Daniel's hand tightened on hers, a small gesture that spoke volumes. The reception that followed was a joyous affair, held in a large tent set up adjacent to the ceremony site. Tables were arranged around a wooden dance floor, each beautifully decorated with wildflowers and candles. A small live band played a mix of classics and current hits, and the food was a delicious blend of local, seasonal specialties. Eleanor found herself warmly welcomed into conversations with Daniel's extended family, many of whom seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. His Aunt Martha insisted on showing her photos of Daniel as a gap-toothed 7-year-old. His cousin Michael shared embarrassing stories of their teenage mishaps. His father engaged her in a thoughtful discussion about the merits of different mystery authors. "They like you," Daniel observed as they helped themselves to slices of the wedding cake, a beautiful 3-tiered creation adorned with sugar flowers. "My family can be overwhelming, but they mean well." "I like them too," Eleanor replied honestly. "They're warm and genuine, like you." After the cake had been served and the mandatory toasts given, the band struck up a slow, romantic melody. Daniel set down his champagne glass and turned to Eleanor, his expression questioning. "Would you do me the honor?" he asked, extending his hand. Eleanor hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I haven't danced in years," she warned. "Neither have I," Daniel admitted as he led her to the dance floor. "We can be rusty together." As his arms encircled her and they began to sway to the music, Eleanor was struck by the rightness of the moment. Here, surrounded by celebration and new beginnings, held securely in Daniel's embrace, she felt the final pieces of her frozen heart thawing. "You know what I was thinking during the ceremony?" Daniel murmured, his lips close to her ear. "What's that?" she asked, leaning back slightly to see his face. "That life is a series of endings and beginnings all woven together. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, endings lead to beginnings we never could have imagined." Eleanor thought of her wedding dress, sold out of desperate necessity, and how that ending had led to this new beginning, this man, this moment, this unexpected joy. "Yes," she said softly, resting her head against his shoulder as they continued to move in perfect harmony. "Sometimes they do." The drive back from Vermont was quiet but comfortable, both Eleanor and Daniel wrapped in the warm afterglow of the weekend. They had stayed an extra day after the wedding, taking Rebecca's suggestion to hike to the waterfall, where they had picnicked on sandwiches packed by the inn's kitchen and shared lazy kisses on a sun-warmed rock. Now, as the countryside gradually gave way to suburbs and eventually the familiar skyline of the city, Eleanor felt a curious mixture of contentment and apprehension. The weekend had been magical, a perfect bubble outside of everyday life. What would happen when that bubble burst and reality reasserted itself? "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, glancing over at her as they stopped at a red light. Eleanor considered deflecting with a casual response but opted for honesty instead. "I'm wondering how this works in real life," she admitted. "Us, I mean, outside of romantic inns and family weddings." Daniel reached across the console to take her hand. "I think it works however we want it to," he said. "One day at a time, figuring it out together." His simple, earnest answer eased some of the tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. "I'd like that," she said softly. When they reached her apartment building, Daniel insisted on carrying her bag upstairs despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of managing it herself. "I know you're capable," he said as they climbed the stairs. "I just want an excuse to prolong our time together." At her door, he set down her bag and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her toes curl. "Thank you for this weekend," he murmured against her lips. "For being my date, for charming my family, for everything." "Thank you for inviting me," Eleanor replied, her hands resting lightly on his chest. It was... She searched for the right word. Healing. Daniel's eyes softened at her choice of terminology. "For me too," he said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Do you work at the library tomorrow?" Eleanor nodded. "Morning shift 8 to 1, then I'm at the shop Wednesday and Thursday." "I'll see you then, if not before." He kissed her once more, a gentle, lingering kiss that left her slightly breathless, before reluctantly pulling away. "Sweet dreams, Eleanor Mitchell." She watched him descend the stairs, a smile playing on her lips. "Sweet dreams, Daniel Harris," she called after him. That night, Eleanor slept more soundly than she had in years, her dreams filled with lakeside vistas and dancing under starlit skies. The next morning brought a return to routine, the familiar walk to the library, the comforting smell of books, the satisfaction of helping patrons find exactly what they were looking for. But everything felt subtly different, infused with a new energy and purpose. "You're glowing," observed her co-worker Pamela during their morning break. "Vermont must have agreed with you." Eleanor couldn't help the blush that colored her cheeks. "It was a lovely weekend," she acknowledged. "And how's the dress shop going?" Pamela asked, sipping her tea. "Still enjoying it?" "More than I expected to," Eleanor admitted. "It's different from library work, but there's a similar satisfaction in helping people find what they need." They chatted amicably until their break was over, then returned to their respective duties. As Eleanor reshelved books in the biography section, her phone vibrated with a text message. Checking to make sure no patrons needed her assistance, she slipped it from her pocket. It was from Daniel. "Missing you already. Had an idea. Dinner at my place tomorrow night? I make a mean lasagna." Eleanor smiled, quickly typing back, "That sounds wonderful. What can I bring?" "Just yourself," came the swift reply, followed by another message. "And maybe stay for breakfast. Guest room is yours if you want it. No pressure." The thoughtfulness of the offer, giving her space and options, making it clear he wasn't pushing for physical intimacy, touched her deeply. "I'd like that," she responded. And I'll bring dessert. My apple pie is legendary." The next day and a half passed in a pleasant blur of anticipation. Eleanor found herself humming as she worked, drawing curious glances from her library colleagues. When Wednesday evening finally arrived, she stood in front of her closet once again, though with considerably less panic than she had felt before the Vermont trip. She settled on a casual but flattering outfit, jeans that she knew fit her well and a soft, slightly dressy blouse in a warm coral color that brought out the highlights in her brown hair. She packed an overnight bag with essentials and pajamas, feeling both nervous and excited at the prospect of spending the night at Daniel's home, even in the guest room. The apple pie she had baked that morning was still slightly warm, the aroma of cinnamon and nutmeg filling her small kitchen as she carefully placed it in a carrier. With one last glance in the mirror, she headed out, following the directions Daniel had texted her to an address in a pleasant neighborhood about 20 minutes from her apartment. Daniel's home turned out to be a charming townhouse with a small but well-tended front garden. The door opened before she could knock, revealing Daniel in jeans and a casual button-down, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. "Perfect timing," he said, greeting her with a kiss that tasted faintly of the red wine he must have been sampling. "The lasagna just came out of the oven." He ushered her inside, taking the pie carrier and her overnight bag. The interior of the townhouse was a reflection of Daniel himself. Warm, comfortable, tastefully arranged without being fussy. The decor was a blend of modern and traditional, with built-in bookshelves flanking a brick fireplace in the living room and an open-concept kitchen featuring both contemporary appliances and a farmhouse-style table. "This is lovely," Eleanor said, genuinely impressed as she took in the space. "You have a beautiful home." "Thank you," Daniel replied, setting her bag on a chair and the pie on the kitchen counter. "I've been here about 3 years. Bought it after selling my previous place. Needed a fresh start." Eleanor nodded in understanding. She had considered moving after Mark died, but ultimately couldn't bear to leave the apartment they had shared, filled with memories both painful and precious. Daniel poured her a glass of wine and gave her a proper tour of the house. In addition to the living room and kitchen, there was a small dining area, a home office filled with books, and upstairs, 2 bedrooms and a renovated bathroom. "This is you," he said, showing her the guest room, which was simply but comfortably furnished with a queen-sized bed, a reading chair, and a small desk. "Bathrooms across the hall, and I'm at the end if you need anything." Back downstairs, Daniel finished preparing dinner while Eleanor set the table, working together with an easy synchronicity that felt surprisingly natural. The lasagna, when served, proved to be as good as promised. Layers of pasta, rich meat sauce, and perfectly melted cheese. "This is delicious," Eleanor complimented after her first bite. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother taught me the basics," Daniel said, refilling their wine glasses. "But I really got serious about it after Sophia died. Cooking became a kind of therapy. It required focus, created something tangible, and at the end there was food, which I needed to eat anyway." Eleanor nodded. "I get that. For me it was cleaning, especially during those first few months. I must have had the cleanest apartment in the city." They shared a knowing look, another moment of connection over their shared experiences of grief. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said as they finished their meal. "It's personal, about Mark." "Of course," Eleanor replied, curious about what he wanted to know. Daniel hesitated, seemingly choosing his words carefully. "When did you know? That it was real? That he was someone you could build a life with?" Eleanor considered the question, touched by the thoughtfulness behind it. "It wasn't a single moment," she said finally, "more a series of realizations. The way I felt completely myself around him, never having to pretend or perform. The way he listened, really listened, when I talked about things that mattered to me. The fact that even doing mundane things like grocery shopping or laundry felt better when he was there." She paused, remembering. "But if I had to pick one moment, it would be when my father got sick. about a year into our relationship. Mark dropped everything to drive me to the hospital, stayed with me through that awful night, holding my hand, bringing me terrible coffee, just being there. Steady and supportive without trying to fix things or tell me how to feel. Daniel nodded, his expression reflective. That's how it was with Sophia, too. Not a lightning bolt, but a gradual certainty. Like coming home to a place you didn't even know you were looking for. They cleared the table together, moving around each other in the kitchen with a comfortable familiarity that belied the newness of their relationship. As Daniel stacked the dishes in the dishwasher, Eleanor prepared to serve her pie, hunting for dessert plates in the cabinets. "Second cabinet on the left," Daniel directed. "Bottom shelf." Eleanor opened the indicated cabinet and reached for the dessert plates, but as she did so, her eyes caught on something on the upper shelf. A set of blue and white dishes with a distinctive pattern that sent a shock of recognition through her. She froze, her hand still extended toward the dessert plates. "Eleanor?" Daniel asked, noticing her sudden stillness. "Everything okay?" "These dishes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The blue and white ones on the top shelf. Where did you get them?" Daniel looked confused by the question. "They were Sophia's. She collected that pattern, Royal Copenhagen, I think it's called. Why?" Eleanor slowly lowered her hand, turning to face him. "Mark's mother had the exact same set," she said, an inexplicable tightness in her chest. "They were her prize possession. She'd received them as a wedding gift from her Danish grandmother." "That's a strange coincidence," Daniel said, moving closer to peer at the dishes in question. "It's more than that," Eleanor continued, feeling slightly off balance. "After she died, Mark inherited them. We used them for special occasions, Christmas, birthdays." She swallowed hard, a memory surfacing with painful clarity. "The last time we used them was for our anniversary dinner, 3 months before his diagnosis." Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes. "And after he passed, I had to sell them," Eleanor confirmed, her voice cracking slightly, "along with so many other things, the medical bills, the funeral expenses. It was all so overwhelming." Daniel reached for her hand, his eyes gentle but concerned. "Eleanor, when exactly did you sell them?" "About 2 years ago," she said, trying to piece together the timeline in her mind. "It was at an estate sale company. They handled everything because I couldn't bear to do it myself." Daniel's expression shifted, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face. "Sophia bought a set of Royal Copenhagen dishes at an estate sale about 2 years ago," he said slowly. "She was so excited about finding them at a good price. They matched pieces she already had." The implication hung in the air between them, too incredible to fully process. Could the dishes that had once been part of Eleanor and Mark's life together now be sitting in Daniel's cabinet? The odds seemed astronomical, and yet— "May I?" Eleanor asked, gesturing toward the cabinet. Daniel nodded, stepping aside to give her access. Eleanor carefully lifted down one of the dinner plates, turning it over to examine the bottom. There, in the distinctive blue glaze, was the Royal Copenhagen mark she remembered. But what made her breath catch was a tiny, almost imperceptible scratch in the corner, a mark that had been made when Mark had accidentally knocked the plate against a serving dish one Christmas. "It's them," she whispered, her fingers tracing the small imperfection. "They're actually our dishes." The plate trembled slightly in her hands as the full weight of the connection hit her. These dishes had traveled from Mark's mother to them, then through an estate sale to Sophia, and now to Daniel's home, where Eleanor was once again holding them in an entirely different life than the one she had imagined for herself. It was too much, too strange, too overwhelming. The boundaries between her life with Mark and her emerging relationship with Daniel suddenly seemed blurry, as if the past and present were colliding in ways she couldn't quite comprehend. "I need some air," she said abruptly, carefully setting the plate on the counter and moving toward the back door that led to a small patio. Outside, the evening air was cool against her flushed skin. Eleanor leaned against the railing, taking deep breaths, trying to calm the storm of emotions the dishes had triggered. She wasn't sure why she was reacting so strongly. It was just a set of dishes, after all, and yet they represented something fundamental about the interconnectedness of her past and present that both moved and unsettled her. She heard the door open behind her but didn't turn around, not quite ready to face Daniel. He didn't speak, simply came to stand beside her, offering his silent presence while giving her the space to process her feelings. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I didn't mean to react that way. It was just so unexpected." "Don't apologize," Daniel replied softly. "It's a lot to take in." Eleanor turned to look at him, searching his face. "Does it bother you that I'm still so connected to him, to that life?" Daniel considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "No," he said finally, "because I understand it, because I still feel connected to Sophia too. Our past loves aren't competition, Eleanor. They're part of who we are, who we've become." His words eased something tight in her chest, allowing her to breathe more freely. "It's just so strange," she mused. "All these connections we didn't even know existed. Your wife altering my wedding dress, our dishes finding their way to your cabinet. It's almost like they're telling us something?" Daniel suggested, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe," Eleanor conceded, though the rational part of her mind resisted such fanciful thinking. "Or maybe it's just the random chaos of the universe, throwing coincidences at us that we try to make meaning from." Daniel reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "Either way," he said, "I'm grateful that the universe, random or otherwise, brought you into my life." Standing there in the gentle evening light, her hand warm in his, Eleanor found herself echoing the sentiment despite the emotional turbulence of the past half hour. "So am I," she said softly. "So am I." They did eventually eat the apple pie, though the discovery of the dishes had cast a strange, almost mystical atmosphere over the evening. When Eleanor finally retired to the guest room, her mind was still swirling with thoughts about connection, coincidence, and the invisible threads that seemed to be binding her past and present together. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams filled with Mark and Sophia, though she had never met the latter. In her dreams, they were sitting at a table set with the blue and white dishes, smiling and talking as if they were old friends, occasionally glancing toward Eleanor with knowing looks. She woke early, dawn just beginning to filter through the curtains. For a moment, she lay still, orienting herself to the unfamiliar room, listening to the quiet sounds of Daniel's house settling around her. After a few minutes, she heard soft movements from downstairs, cabinet doors opening and closing, water running. Slipping out of bed, she pulled on her robe and made her way downstairs to find Daniel in the kitchen, his hair still mussed from sleep, preparing coffee. He looked up when she entered, his face breaking into a warm smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice still carrying traces of sleep. "How did you sleep?" "Strangely," Eleanor admitted, accepting the mug of coffee he offered. "Lots of dreams." Daniel nodded in understanding. "Me too. About Sophia?" "And Mark," Eleanor confirmed, leaning against the counter. They were together, talking like old friends. It was oddly comforting. "I dreamed about them too," Daniel said, a note of wonder in his voice. Sophia was showing Mark her sewing studio, laughing about something. They exchanged a look of shared amazement at the parallel nature of their dreams. It was another unlikely connection, another thread binding them together. "What do you think it means?" Eleanor asked, blowing gently on her coffee to cool it. Daniel considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "I'm not usually one for mystical interpretations, but it almost feels like approval. Like they're okay with this, with us." Eleanor nodded slowly. It did feel that way, as if the universe, or Mark and Sophia, or some combination of both, were giving them permission to move forward together. The thought eased something in her that she hadn't realized was still tense, still waiting for a sign that what she was doing wasn't a betrayal of what she had shared with Mark. They prepared breakfast together, moving around the kitchen in comfortable synchronicity. The dishes from the night before safely returned to their cabinet but not forgotten. By unspoken agreement, they kept the conversation light, discussing plans for the day ahead. A new author Eleanor had discovered, a supplier Daniel was considering for the shop. It wasn't until they were clearing the breakfast dishes that Daniel broached the subject that had clearly been on both their minds. "Eleanor," he began, setting down the plate he was rinsing, "about last night, about the dishes and everything else. I want you to know that I don't take any of this lightly. What's happening between us, I mean." Eleanor turned to face him, struck by the earnestness in his expression. "Neither do I," she said softly. "When Sophia died," Daniel continued, "I thought that was it for me. I assumed I'd live the rest of my life alone, maybe find some companionship eventually, but never this. Never something that feels so—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Real," Eleanor suggested. "Yes," Daniel agreed, relief evident in his voice. "Real and deep, and sometimes a little scary in its intensity." Eleanor understood exactly what he meant. What was developing between them had a weight, a significance that couldn't be dismissed or taken lightly. It wasn't just two lonely people seeking comfort. It was a genuine connection that had the potential to reshape both their lives. "I've been thinking," Daniel said, taking a step closer to her, "about what I want, what I hope for going forward. And I realized that I haven't been completely clear with you." He took a deep breath, as if gathering his courage. "I'm falling in love with you, Eleanor. Actually, that's not quite accurate. I've already fallen. I love you." The words hung in the air between them, simple but profound. Eleanor felt her heart racing, a mixture of joy and fear coursing through her. Part of her had known this was coming, had felt the same feelings growing in her own heart, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that was both wonderful and terrifying. "You don't have to say it back," Daniel added quickly, seeing the complex emotions crossing her face. "I just needed you to know where I stand, what I'm hoping for. I see a future with you, Eleanor, if you want that too." Eleanor reached for his hand, needing the physical connection to ground herself as she sorted through her feelings. Did she love Daniel? Yes, she realized with startling clarity. She did. The emotion had grown so gradually, so naturally, that she hadn't fully recognized it until this moment. But was she ready to declare it? To commit to the future he was offering? "I need to be honest too," she said finally, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I care for you deeply, Daniel, more than I thought possible after Mark. What I feel for you is real and true and growing stronger every day." She squeezed his hand, needing him to understand the complexity of her emotions. "But saying those words, they're not just words to me. They're a promise. And before I make that promise, I need to be sure that I can keep it fully, without reservation." Daniel's expression was thoughtful, not disappointed as she had feared. "I understand," he said, bringing her hand to his lips to press a gentle kiss against her knuckles. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." The simple acceptance in his response, the lack of pressure or expectation, confirmed what Eleanor already knew in her heart. Daniel was a good man, patient and understanding, respectful of her needs and boundaries. The kind of man she could build a life with, when she was ready. They spent the rest of the morning together before Eleanor had to leave for her shift at the library. As Daniel walked her to her car, he pulled her close for a goodbye kiss that managed to be both tender and full of promise. "Dinner on Friday?" he asked as they reluctantly separated. "My sister and Tom are back from their honeymoon and want to have us over." "I'd love that," Eleanor replied, touched by the casual inclusion in his family plans. As she drove to work, Eleanor found herself thinking about Daniel's declaration and her own hesitation. She did love him. Of that she was now certain. So what was holding her back from saying the words, from fully embracing the future he envisioned for them? The answer came to her as she pulled into the library parking lot. She needed to say goodbye properly. Not to Mark himself. She had done that during the long, painful months after his death, but to the life she had planned with him, to the dreams they had shared. She needed to acknowledge that choosing a new path with Daniel didn't diminish what she had shared with Mark, but was instead a different journey, one with its own promise and potential. The realization brought a sense of clarity and purpose. After her shift, instead of heading directly home, Eleanor drove to the cemetery where Mark was buried. She hadn't visited in several months, finding the formal act of visiting his grave less comforting than the private conversations she held with his memory in the quiet of her apartment. The cemetery was peaceful in the late afternoon light, the air warm but not oppressive, a gentle breeze stirring the leaves of the old oak trees that dotted the grounds. Mark's grave was simple, a flat granite marker with his name, the dates of his birth and death, and the line from his favorite poem, "To love and be loved is to feel the sun from both sides." Eleanor knelt beside the marker, brushing away a few fallen leaves. "Hello, love," she said softly, the familiar words coming easily despite her absence. "It's been a while." She told him about Daniel, about the shop, about the incredible coincidence of the dishes. She spoke of her fear and her hope, her guilt, and her growing certainty that moving forward didn't mean leaving Mark behind, but rather carrying him with her in a different way. "I'll always love you," she said, her fingers tracing the engraved letters of his name. "That won't change. But I've found someone who makes me happy, who understands what you meant to me, who doesn't expect me to pretend the years with you didn't shape who I am." She paused, tears welling in her eyes, but not falling. "I think you'd like him, Mark. He's kind and thoughtful and passionate about helping people like you were." A gust of wind rustled the leaves around her, and for a brief, fanciful moment, Eleanor allowed herself to imagine it was a response, a benediction. "I'm going to tell him that I love him," she continued, her voice stronger now, "and I'm going to see where this journey takes us. But I wanted you to know first. I wanted to thank you for teaching me how to love, for showing me that I was worthy of being loved. Everything good in my life now has its roots in what we shared." She stayed a while longer, sitting quietly beside the grave, letting the peace of the place settle around her. When she finally rose to leave, she felt lighter somehow, as if a burden she hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted from her shoulders. "Goodbye for now," she said, touching the marker one last time. "I'll be back, but I think you'd understand if the visits are less frequent. Life is calling me forward." The days until Friday passed in a blur of work and anticipation. Eleanor saw Daniel briefly at the shop on Thursday, but they were busy with customers and had little time for private conversation. She considered telling him about her cemetery visit, about the decision she had made, but something held her back. Such a moment deserved its own time and space, not a rushed exchange between fittings and inventory checks. Friday evening found Eleanor standing outside Rebecca and Tom's new home, a bottle of wine in hand and butterflies in her stomach. She had taken special care with her appearance, wearing a new dress she had splurged on during a rare shopping trip with Pamela from the library. Daniel answered the door, his face lighting up at the sight of her. "You look beautiful," he said, drawing her into a quick embrace. "I've missed you." "It's only been a day," Eleanor laughed, even as she leaned into his warmth. "A very long day," Daniel countered, kissing her briefly before leading her inside. Rebecca greeted her with the same enthusiasm she had shown in Vermont, hugging her warmly and immediately pulling her into the kitchen to help with final dinner preparations, while the men opened wine and discussed Tom's return to work at the hospital. "Daniel hasn't stopped talking about you," Rebecca confided as they prepared a salad together. It's been Eleanor this and Eleanor that since Vermont. It's adorable, actually. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. He's pretty special too, she admitted. Rebecca's expression grew more serious. He is, and he's been through a lot. We all have. But I haven't seen him this happy in years. She squeezed Eleanor's arm gently. Thank you for that, for bringing my brother back to life. The simple sincerity in Rebecca's voice touched Eleanor deeply. He's done the same for me, she said softly. More than he knows. Dinner was a joyful affair, filled with stories from Rebecca and Tom's honeymoon in Italy and comfortable, easy conversation that flowed naturally among the four of them. Eleanor found herself laughing more than she had in years, feeling a sense of belonging that had been missing from her life for too long. As they were preparing dessert, Tom's phone rang, an emergency at the hospital requiring his immediate attention. After apologetic goodbyes and promises to reschedule, Tom departed, leaving Rebecca, Daniel, and Eleanor to finish the evening. I should probably head out too, Eleanor said as they cleared the dessert plates, noting the time. I have an early shift at the library tomorrow. Stay, Daniel said suddenly, his eyes meeting hers across the table. Not here, I mean, but at my place. It's closer to the library than your apartment. The invitation hung in the air, carrying more weight than its simple words suggested. Eleanor looked at Daniel, saw the hope and love in his eyes, and made her decision. Yes, she said simply. I'd like that. After saying goodbye to Rebecca, they drove to Daniel's house in comfortable silence, the weight of Eleanor's decision creating an anticipatory tension between them. She had packed an overnight bag that morning, tucked discreetly in the trunk of her car just in case, though she hadn't been certain until this moment that she would use it. Daniel unlocked the front door, stepping aside to let Eleanor enter first. The house felt different tonight, warmer, more intimate, charged with possibility. Eleanor set her bag down in the entryway, suddenly nervous despite her certainty. Would you like some tea? Daniel asked, ever the considerate host. Eleanor shook her head, gathering her courage. Daniel, there's something I need to say to you. His expression grew serious as he moved closer to her. That sounds ominous, he said, attempting a light tone, though his eyes betrayed his concern. It's not, Eleanor assured him quickly. It's quite the opposite, actually. She took a deep breath, her heart racing. After you told me how you felt, I needed some time to think, to be sure. And I went to visit Mark's grave. Daniel's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't interrupt, giving her the space to continue. I needed to say goodbye properly, Eleanor explained, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. Not to him, I did that a long time ago, but to the future I had imagined with him, to the life we had planned. She stepped closer to Daniel, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. And I realized something important. Loving you doesn't diminish what I had with Mark. It honors it. Because he taught me how to love, how to be loved. And now, she reached for Daniel's hand, intertwining their fingers as she looked up into his eyes. And now I'm ready to love again. To love you, Daniel. I love you. The words, once spoken, felt like a release, a burden lifted, a door finally opened. Daniel's face transformed, joy blooming in his eyes even as they filled with tears. Eleanor, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled her closer, one hand coming up to cradle her face with infinite tenderness. I love you too. So much. Their lips met in a kiss that was different from any they had shared before, deeper, more certain, full of promise and shared understanding. Eleanor felt herself melting into him, all her doubts dissolving in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he murmured. Not in the guest room. Eleanor nodded, no hesitation in her response. Yes, she said simply. That night, they crossed the final boundary between them, their coming together both passionate and tender, a physical expression of the love they had found in each other. Afterward, lying in the circle of Daniel's arms, Eleanor felt a profound sense of rightness, of coming home to a place she hadn't known existed. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I'm happy," Eleanor replied, the simple truth of it almost overwhelming. "Truly, deeply happy, and that I never expected to feel this way again." Daniel pressed a kiss to her hair. "Neither did I," he admitted. "After Sophia died, I thought that part of my life was over. I resigned myself to it, tried to find meaning in other things." "Like the shop," Eleanor said, understanding. "Yes, it was my way of honoring her memory, of giving purpose to my grief. And it worked, to a point. I found satisfaction in it, in helping others celebrate their beginnings." He tightened his arm around her. "But it wasn't until you walked into my life that I realized how much I had been missing. How much I wanted to believe in new beginnings for myself, not just for others." Eleanor raised herself on one elbow to look at him, taking in the sincerity in his eyes, the love written plainly on his face. "Thank you," she said softly. Daniel's brow furrowed slightly in confusion. "For what?" "For seeing me," Eleanor explained. "Not just the widow, not just someone broken by grief, but me, Eleanor. For being patient, for giving me space to figure things out at my own pace." "You did the same for me," Daniel pointed out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We've been good for each other that way, I think. Meeting each other where we are, understanding what the other needs." Eleanor nodded, settling back against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, no more words needed. When Eleanor woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the windows and Daniel's side of the bed was empty. She stretched languidly, relishing the pleasant ache in her body, a physical reminder of the night they had shared. The scent of coffee and something delicious wafted up from downstairs, drawing her out of bed. She found one of Daniel's shirts draped over a chair, slipping it on along with her underwear before making her way downstairs. Daniel was in the kitchen, his back to her as he flipped pancakes at the stove. He was wearing only pajama bottoms, his torso bare, and Eleanor took a moment to simply appreciate the sight of him. The broad shoulders, the lean back, the easy confidence with which he moved. "Good morning?" she said finally, alerting him to her presence. Daniel turned, his eyes warming as they took in the sight of her in his shirt. "Good morning," he replied, setting down the spatula to approach her. "You look better in that than I do." He kissed her with morning familiarity, as if they had been waking up together for years rather than just this once. It struck Eleanor how natural it felt, how easily they had slipped into this new intimacy. Over breakfast, they talked about practical matters, her shift at the library, his plans for the shop, when they might see each other again. It was all so wonderfully ordinary, this planning of shared time, this carving out of space in their lives for each other. "I've been thinking," Daniel said as they were cleaning up the breakfast dishes, "about the future. Our future." Eleanor looked up from the plate she was drying, her heart skipping at the seriousness in his tone. "What about it?" Daniel leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. "I know it's still early for us. We're just beginning this journey together. But I want you to know that I see long-term with you, Eleanor. I see forever. If that's what you want too." The simple sincerity in his declaration touched Eleanor deeply. "I do want that," she said softly. "I just might need a little time to get there." "We have all the time in the world," Daniel assured her, pulling her into his arms. "I'm not proposing marriage tomorrow. I'm just letting you know where my heart is, where I hope we're heading." Eleanor rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I like knowing that," she admitted. It feels good to plan for a future again, to look forward instead of just getting through each day. They parted reluctantly when it was time for Eleanor to leave for her shift at the library, with promises to talk later and plans for dinner the following evening. As she drove to work, Eleanor found herself smiling, a lightness in her chest that hadn't been there in years. The weeks that followed settled into a comfortable rhythm. Eleanor and Daniel spent most evenings together, alternating between her apartment and his house, learning each other's habits and preferences, building a shared life one day at a time. They worked together at the shop 3 days a week, their professional relationship enhanced rather than complicated by their personal one. Eleanor gradually cut back her hours at the library, finding that the work at Second Chance fulfilled her in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had a natural talent for helping brides find their perfect dress, for listening to their stories and understanding their needs. Daniel often joked that she was his secret weapon, the reason sales had increased so significantly in recent months. "You have a way of making each bride feel special," he told her one evening as they closed up the shop, "like they're the only one who matters. It's a gift." Eleanor smiled, appreciating his praise but also knowing that she had learned the skill from him. Daniel had the same ability to make people feel seen and valued, whether they were customers or friends or the woman he loved. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, about 6 months into their relationship, when a young woman entered the shop looking nervous and a bit overwhelmed. Eleanor approached her with a warm smile, immediately recognizing the signs of a first-time bride uncertain about the whole process. "Welcome to Second Chance," she greeted her. "I'm Eleanor. How can I help you today?" "I'm looking for a wedding dress," the young woman replied, twisting her hands together. "Something simple but beautiful. I don't have a huge budget." "Well, you've come to the right place," Eleanor assured her, gesturing for her to come further into the shop. "We specialize in beautiful dresses at reasonable prices. When's your wedding?" As they talked, Eleanor learned that the bride's name was Amy, that she was marrying her high school sweetheart in a small ceremony next spring, and that she worked as a kindergarten teacher, a job she loved, but that didn't leave much room in her budget for an extravagant dress. "Let me show you a few options that might work for you," Eleanor said, leading Amy toward a section of simpler, more affordable gowns. She selected several that matched Amy's description of what she was looking for, but as she was about to lead her to the fitting room, her eye caught on a familiar silhouette near the back of the shop. Her wedding dress, the one she had sold to Daniel all those months ago, the one that had brought him into her life. It had been displayed in the shop for some time now, admired by many but not yet chosen by anyone. Looking at Amy, at her delicate frame and simple taste, Eleanor had a sudden intuition. "Actually," she said, changing direction, "there's one more I'd like you to try. It's a bit different from what you described, but I have a feeling it might be perfect for you." Amy's eyes widened when she saw the dress, her hand reaching out to touch the delicate lace with reverence. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "but it looks expensive." "It's within your budget," Eleanor assured her, knowing that Daniel would approve a special price if necessary. "Would you like to try it on?" In the fitting room, Eleanor helped Amy into the dress, adjusting the fabric and securing the closures with practiced hands. When Amy turned to face the mirror, her gasp was audible, her hands flying to her mouth in surprise and delight. "It fits perfectly," she said in wonder, turning to see the dress from different angles. "Like it was made for me." Eleanor stepped back, a curious tightness in her throat as she observed the young woman in her former wedding dress. The dress that had once represented her hopes and dreams with Mark, that had been part of one of the happiest days of her life, now stood poised to create similar memories for someone new. "What do you think?" Amy asked, seeking confirmation of what she already felt. "I think it's your dress," Eleanor said simply, knowing it was true. The dress belonged with this young woman now, ready to be part of a new love story. When Amy decided to purchase the dress, Eleanor found Daniel in his office to process the sale. As she explained which dress had been chosen, understanding dawned in his eyes. "Are you okay with that?" he asked softly, his concern evident. Eleanor nodded, surprised to find that she genuinely was. "More than okay," she assured him. "It feels right somehow. Full circle." Later that evening, as they prepared dinner together in Daniel's kitchen, which had gradually become their kitchen as Eleanor spent more and more nights there, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. "It's strange to think how it all started," she said, chopping vegetables for a salad while Daniel checked on the roasting chicken. "With my wedding dress. If I hadn't needed to sell it, if you hadn't seen the listing, if Sophia hadn't altered it in the first place," Daniel added, coming to stand beside her. "So many connections we didn't even know existed until they brought us together." Eleanor set down her knife, turning to face him. "Do you ever wonder if there's some greater plan at work? Some reason why all these threads of our lives seem to be woven together?" Daniel considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know about a divine plan," he said finally, "but I do think that love leaves marks on the world, creates connections that remain even when the people are gone." He reached for her hand. "What you shared with Mark, what I shared with Sophia, those bonds didn't disappear when they died. They changed shape, became part of who we are, led us to each other." The simple wisdom in his words resonated deeply with Eleanor. "I like that idea," she said softly. "That love doesn't end, it just transforms." Daniel pulled her into his arms, his eyes full of the future they were building together. "And sometimes," he murmured, "if we're very lucky, it comes full circle, bringing us exactly where we need to be." As Eleanor leaned up to kiss him, she knew with absolute certainty that she was indeed exactly where she needed to be. In this kitchen, in this moment, in the arms of this man who had helped her heart remember how to love. And somewhere, perhaps, Mark and Sophia were smiling. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.